Good evening. We wish to welcome you to The Journey. The Journey is a ministry of the Christ in Highbury Park. The focus of our ministry is on personal growth and development. We are delighted to have so many of you joining us this evening. And we want to get started with a word of prayer. I want to invite our elder, Brother Kevin Benamy, to open us in a word of prayer at this time.
Good evening, everybody. Let's go ahead and pray as we get started. Eternal King, thank you for this day and this opportunity that you've afforded us to come together on this Zoom platform. I pray that the information imparted this evening may enrich all of our lives. Bless the presenter, bless the organizers, bless the listeners, and those who've assembled to feast on the rich information that is prepared for us. We just thank you. In Christ's name I do pray. Amen.
All right, thank you, Elder Benamy. As I said earlier, The Journey is a ministry of the Church of Christ in Highbury Park, and the focus is on personal growth and development. And I want to just let you know who the committee members are in this ministry. I'm, I guess you could say, the chairperson. Sister Nicole Roca is one of the key members of this committee, along with Sister Annette Cash. And we received significant assistance from one of our young sisters, Eudacia Taylor. She's our marketing and advertising consultant. And so we want to extend our thanks to her for the services that she would have provided to us. Tonight, we are in for a wonderful time. I'm saying this in well in advance, as this is intended to be part one of a two-part series. And our dear brother, friend, Darren Cash, will get us started tonight. I want to give you some background information on Darren. Darren is no doubt no stranger to many of us. Darren's name perhaps is a household item for many. Darren is the MBA, he's the CPA and a CA. He's a principal in the firm Darren Cash and Associates. Darren's firm provides consulting services with a concentration in the area of strategic planning. Darren's business experience spans some 30 years. And I'm wondering how Darren could have all this experience, and he looks so young. But some 30 years, he says, and prior to establishing his practice in 2010, Darren served as the Chief Financial Officer at First Caribbean International Bank. He also served as the Chief Financial Officer at Doctors Hospital Health Services System. Before joining Doctors Hospital, Darren spent 10 years in public accounting. Darren worked with Ernst & Young in Nassau. Additionally, he worked at KPMG in Nassau as well in New York. Darren has held leadership positions on a broad range in business and in civic organizations. He is the former chairman of the board of the Bahamas Development Bank. Additionally, he's the past president of the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants. He's the past president of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce. And prior to his retirement from active frontline politics, Darren served as the national chairman of the Free National Movement. Additionally, in the Free National Movement, he served as treasurer, deputy chairman, vice chairman, and he also served his country as a senator during the period 1997 to 2002. As I said earlier, Darren is married to Annette Cash, and they are the proud parents of two children, two well-behaved children, Jordan and Jonathan. And so without further ado, I introduce to you our facilitator for tonight, the distinguished Darren Cash.
Let me get started. There we go. Thank you very much, Brother Frederick. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The first question I ask is one, can you hear me okay?
I know I can hear you, Darren. I can hear you and I can see you.
That's excellent. I know the lighting in this studio is not as good as it normally is, but I'll see if I can make do anyway. All right. So let me see. I think you should be able to see the slide presentation. There we go.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Now, let me begin by saying again, thank you very much, Brother Fenwick and the organizers of the journey for this kind invitation to be a part of your inaugural series of presentations. I also want to thank all of the members of the audience for being a part of this. Certainly, time is the most significant resource that we have. And so I want to thank you for spending some of it with me this evening. I trust that by the end of the evening, you will have been able to say that it was time well spent. Now, it's important to emphasize, I want to say I have a script here, and I hope that I'm going to be able to stick with it. There are a few points that I think are necessary to make in this kind of a presentation, but I'm going to go where the Spirit leads me. And hopefully we will still stay on track. Now, normally when people come to this kind of a presentation, they come to it from different angles. There are some people who are just in the stage of thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. There are then others who have a specific idea or product for a product or service in mind, and they haven't really done much about it as yet. And then there are some who are well on their way. They already have a service and come to these kinds of session hoping for some kind of a breakthrough. Now, if you looked at the promotion of this event, the organizers had a sense of staying focused on those persons who are at the starting point of this journey towards entrepreneurship. And even though the folks who come at this from different paths do so with different things in mind, I think there are some broad themes that I'll be able to touch on that I think will serve all of the participants, but I do hope that I will be able to keep my pivot foot, so to speak, firmly where the organizers want me to be, and that is on those folks who are at the starting point of their journey. Now, I want to just emphasize, given the significance of the topic, that this is the presentation for mature audiences. No, there'll be no bad words or anything like that, but it is important for me to emphasize that there are some things that ought to be bluntly said for those who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs. Certainly when you look at some of our political leaders, there's generally a sense that they expect everyone is going to open a business or become an entrepreneur, and quite frankly, that just is not realistic. And as I'll say on more than one occasion during this presentation, it really is not for everyone. A couple starting housekeeping matters. I want to emphasize that entrepreneurship has nothing to do with age. That it is very, very important for all of us to appreciate that we don't have to be young and sprightly in order to become entrepreneurs or to be thinking about becoming entrepreneurs. You're never too old to start. And I want to emphasize too that we not make this a passive interaction this evening. Now, I know for most of us who are on Zoom calls, we tend to do several different things during the presentation: ironing, cleaning, doing the dishes, and so on. I say you can do all of that. I understand some of that is always going to happen, but I want to recommend that you get a pad and pencil so that you are able to take a few notes during the course of the presentation. I don't know, Brother Frederick, whether this setting provides an opportunity for participants to provide comments during the presentation, but if at any time you have some comments that you want to make, certainly in answer to some of the questions that I might pose, feel free to drop them into the chat so that at least the organizers are going to be able to have the benefit of some feedback as they plan for subsequent sessions. Now, I want to say from the beginning that during the course of the presentation, I'll make a few references to the fact that becoming an entrepreneur is a journey indeed, and I'm glad that the organizers framed it in the context of being a journey. What you see there is the fact that I like to draw the parallel between entrepreneurship and running a marathon. And my experience as a marathoner has given me some experience in the long and arduous task of planning for a long journey. And I say that not to impress you, but to impress upon you the fact that this path will be challenging, but it will be extremely enriching as you move along. So let's jump right into the question, into the topic, and begin with one of the questions that was posed. Who is an entrepreneur? And I wonder if anyone has a quick answer on who is an entrepreneur. Any takers? All right, so let me throw something out at you. Before we talk about the entrepreneur, the definition of an entrepreneur, I want to step back to something that all of us learned a while ago when we started thinking about getting into business. It may have been when we were in high school or when we did a course. But one of the first things they told us was that there are factors of production that we use when we are starting a business to produce a good or service: land, labor, and capital. And it became clear that over time, you could certainly give someone land, labor, and capital, and nothing would happen. Or if something happened, it didn't persist for a long period of time. And so over time, it became clear that there was another element that was missing, that in addition to land, labor, and capital, running a business and sustaining a business involved another factor. And over time, that factor came to be known as entrepreneurship. Now, the word entrepreneur is said to have been derived from a French word which means to undertake. And when I was in Junior Achievement many years ago, they told us in our company, which was called the Young Entrepreneurs, that an entrepreneur is one who assumes risk. And of course, the assumption of risk is a core fundamental when it comes to entrepreneurship. But ultimately, it came clear that it was a little bit more than that. And I like this definition that I found online from an organization called thebalance.com. And it says, entrepreneurship is the drive to develop an idea into a business. The drive to develop an idea into a business. An entrepreneur is the person who combines those other three factors of production together to get that business going. And the most successful and innovative ones are risk takers. The most successful and innovative ones are risk takers. So clearly, when you look at the word, it is an intangible. It is not like capital. It is not like land. It's not in the flesh per se. It is an intangible. In a lot of ways, it's a way of thinking. It is a way of using creative imagination. So the question for you is, as you contemplate your journey to entrepreneurship, what are you thinking about? Now, again, I say entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And this is a good point to emphasize that there is a difference between the part-time job, which a lot of people sign up for, a side hustle, which a lot of Bahamians know about, or a true entrepreneurial endeavor. Now, in reality, there can be a very seamless progression from one to the other, but there is a clear distinction between them. And the key factor is, what are you personally thinking about? So I would like for you to reflect for a moment as to what is the purpose of entrepreneurship. Now I'm going to pause and I'm going to give you a moment to jot something down, your definition of the purpose of entrepreneurship. Here's my definition. The purpose of entrepreneurship is to sustain human life and advance civilization. To sustain human life and advance civilization. Now I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? What did you write down? Was it narrow or was it broad? Was it timid or was it bold? Was it ambitious? Was it gutsy? Was it exciting? Was it boring?
Darren,
Yes.
what I wrote down, I simply wrote down to create wealth, personal wealth.
Okay, that's excellent, to create personal wealth. I'm open to any other taker.
Financial freedom.
Financial freedom. Excellent. That's big. That's big. I didn't
Also a risk taker.
Risk taker. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm going to come back to mine for a moment, because I want to emphasize to sustain human life and advance civilization, because it's big. Now, I want you to think for a moment about where you stand and where you are when you're coming to this presentation. Do you have an idea that you have been carrying around in your head for the last 5, 10 years and you've never acted on it? Have you been thinking about something that you think can really make a difference, but you've just never had the time to do anything about it? And how many of you have been in that uncomfortable position where the idea that you had been thinking about for however ages suddenly came into reality because somebody else did it? Now, when you think about what you have in mind and you think about the importance of being ambitious and not timid, look at what I put out there. Does it move the Bahamas truly into the 21st century? Does it revolutionize our tourism product? Does it revolutionize land-based cultural experiences for tourism, for tourists? Does it Is it designed like the Harlem Children's Zone to reinvent how we educate children for a digital future? Is it really bold and designed to transform how small island developing states manage climate change? So I want to put on the screen something that has provided a bit of inspiration for me as I think about and talk about and interact with people about what ambitious, game-changing goals, entrepreneurial pursuits are. The picture on your left, of course, is Elon Musk's SpaceX project as it's taking off. And if you think about that for a moment, and where big thinking, game-changing ideas come from, years ago, everything was NASA, i.e. the United States government, or the Russians who dominated space. And now you've got the private sector bringing great passion, energy, and drive to things that was only within the purview of nation states before. Big dreams, big goals. And on your right, of course, is the awe-inspiring reality within the last year or two of rockets which previously were unusable, landing back on a pad to be reused again. So what's the core principle when you think about that game-changing entrepreneurial pursuit? Think big. Think big. Now, when I talk about thinking big, I want to emphasize that it is very important for us to not think about it in the context of our existing circumstances. I know for many of us, there are times when, as we think about entrepreneurial pursuits, our reality is in the moment, we don't know how we're going to make ends meet over the next 2 weeks, much less the next 2 months. Or we've got a financial challenge that we have been thinking about or really being dragged down for the last few years. And I know how tempting it is to limit our thinking about our entrepreneurial pursuits to the reality of the moment. But I want to encourage you this evening that when you think about what that entrepreneurial endeavor is that you've been carrying around, that you not think in the context of your existing circumstances, that you do in fact think that great things are possible beyond where our existing circumstances are. And so what's an entrepreneur? Who is an entrepreneur? A big, game-changing thinker who is prepared to take the risks of bringing energy, passion, innovation, and ideas to the process of doing great things to either achieve financial freedom, financial independence, financial stability, to change the Bahamas. Now, this is a good point to pivot to the next question that was posed. When do you know that you're ready? And the first point to be made is that there are multiple ready points. And just as we saw with SpaceX's mission into space, it starts with the destination. Where is it that you want to go? We talked a few moments about the fact that when you think of your entrepreneurial pursuit, it may be something specific about tourism and how you want to revolutionize our product. It may be something about how do you revolutionize the process of education in the country in a way that is financially beneficial. It may be about doing something about sea level rise in a way that can change the future for many Caribbean nations. What specifically do you want to accomplish? Crew selection. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to definition, when it comes to the destination, it is when there is clarity of purpose that you're ready for the next step. Unless there's clarity of purpose, you're like a gun about to fire half-cocked, not quite ready. Crew selection. When this is done, then you're ready for the next step. Planning. This is a multi-phase process, just like thinking about what it is you're going to do. Training. Anyone going into space must go through the process of doing simulations, and it's only after those are done that they're ready to move on to the next phase. And then there's launch day, which brings, of course, its own set of launch conditions, and sometimes they're not within our control. So again, there are multiple ready points, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the things in a moment, but it's clear that there are multiple ready points, and there is a process by which we move on to the next phase. Item B, there's never a point when you are 100% ready. And that's the experience that a lot of us have. We wait until everything is absolutely perfect. And the reality is that things are never 100% perfect. So we're never going to be 100% ready. So I want to talk a little bit then about some of the rules of the road when it comes to the process of when do we know we're ready. Rule number one, you're ready when most, not all or nearly all, but most of the key pieces are in place. And again, we can think back to those factors of production. Land, where's it going to come from? Labor, where's it going to come from? Capital, where's it going to come from? Once they are in place, then we're ready to move on to the next. Or when we know exactly where they might be coming from, as I say, if they're not in place, they're on the way. I'm building up to something here that you'll see. So hang with me for a few. Rule number two, spend quality time in research. You're not ready to start until after you've done so. Now, this is one of those areas where when we talk to people about becoming an entrepreneur, it becomes a bit of a rub because research is not always easy, but it is time consuming. It does require a lot of effort, pretty much like goal setting. If you follow a typical goal setting program, they might say, listen, the process of setting your goals can take you 15, 20, or 30 hours. And that's a huge time commitment for a lot of people. But the fact is that after you've spent that time, the investment of that time pays off considerably down the road to the point where that sense of purpose and direction begins to save you time and energy, and your life becomes a lot more efficient. So rule number two, spend quality time in research. And that time must be spent on the front end. You're not ready until you've invested that time in research. Now, I want to pause here for a moment and talk a little bit about this thing about research. Because in a lot of ways, it is one of those areas where the greatest investment is made, and it is the point where for a lot of people, things can become very discouraging. It is one of those areas where to become an entrepreneur, you've got to demonstrate the consistency and persistency necessary to invest the time. Now, I want to do a couple of things to emphasize, if you follow the scripture, the principle that there is nothing new under the heaven. Many times when I do presentation on these, I tend to remind members of the audience that when it comes to doing things like research, there are many resources available to you. And there are a lot of core principles where you don't have to be a college graduate or a professional of any kind to be able to think clearly about how to make your project a reality. So I'm holding up a book called In Search of Excellence, right? In Search of Excellence was published back in 1982. Yet it is one of the classics about how great organizations are formed and how they are built. Now, a great part of research would be to pick up a copy of a book like this and begin to use it as a guide, because it can answer a lot of your questions. Now, let me read something for you that I think you will understand and put in the context of what we just talked about when we talk about dreaming big and really thinking about game-changing ideas. It says the new idea either finds a champion or it dies. No ordinary involvement with the new idea provides the energy required to cope with the indifference and resistance that major technological change provokes. Champions of new inventions display persistence and courage of heroic quality. Why do I cite that? Because this chapter deals with entrepreneurship and what that entrepreneurial mindset needs to be. Why do I cite it in the context of research? Because the guides to make you just as savvy as one of the big accounting firms or the big consulting firms, the guide is right here and available to you. Another one, Built to Last, again, published in 1994. Another classic, and I guarantee you that if you enroll in any online program or any university course today, they're going to draw reference to some of these classics. And what you will find is the fundamental principles have not changed. Sure, with innovations in technology, with new processes that make life and work more efficient, some elements have changed, but the core principles of what's involved in creating a dynamic company that is able to keep reinventing itself, those haven't changed. Chapter 7 of the book says, try a lot of stuff and keep what works. I'll talk a little bit about innovation in a moment. Harvard Business Review, again, just to emphasize the point that when it comes to research, and I have a line coming, so I don't want anyone who's thinking about how much work or how hard this is going to be to bear in mind. There are ways to get around that. But I want to emphasize that this book, published in 1997, talks a lot about innovation. And it is about the fact that great organizations that change the world are constantly focused on innovation. This is 1997. The core principles remain the same. We can talk about it in the Q&A. Tom Peters, In Pursuit of Wow. One of the things we'll talk about in a few moments is, what is it about your organization that, or what you want to do, your idea? What is it that makes it stand out from everything else? Well, Tom Peters has been writing about, and I'm not even sure he's around anymore, but he's been writing about how great organizations just bend over backwards to separate themselves from everybody else. Last point. It's called the China strategy. And here's where it's important, not only in the context of an individual's vision for how to change their own circumstances and the circumstances around them. But this also applies to nations as well. And here's a line. It says, and he's talking about one individual who, after the Olympics were held in Beijing, suddenly came to prominence because of an opportunity that was provided. But he's talking about the fact that China as a nation was advancing at such a significant clip compared to others. And he says, China has hundreds of thousands of Li Lings, is the name of the person, entrepreneurs who have driven one of the fastest sustained national economic growth rates of any country in world history. They may not all be as successful as Li, but after decades of being held back by their country's adoption of socialism, they and the rest of the Chinese population are moving forward with the force of water gushing from a broken dam. With the force of water gushing from a broken dam. The intensity of their aspirations joined with their plans and the plans of government create the great opportunities to transform the lives of hundreds of millions of people. Again, the key point here is to emphasize that when it comes to thinking things through and doing research, resources are immediately available and you don't have to break the bank in order to take advantage of them. Rule number 3, and this is a bit of a sidebar. After you start, even if you make only the first few steps, you've got to spend some time and begin to plan spending time in research and development. And this is vital. Now I'll give you a moment to take a look at the comments on the screen because they provide a little bit of perspective about what I meant about innovation a few moments ago. And it's the story of one of the great companies that we know about. So it is the story of Apple, and in 2019, you can see 4.2 billion in a single quarter spent on research and development, 10% of its total revenues. And by the end of the year, it was expected that they would spend $16 billion doing research and development. Now, what is research and development? Well, here's how they explain it. We want to improve the user experience and differentiate our products and services in the marketplace. So let's pause for a moment and think about your entrepreneurial endeavor. Just reflect for a moment on, is it big? Is it likely to change the lives or the life experience of people, whether Bahamians or tourists? How do we separate ourselves from everybody else? Picture for a moment the experience of, what is the place? R.M. Bailey Park on Easter, Christmas. I wonder if you have the same vision I have of dozens of stalls spread along the road, all seemingly selling the exact same thing. The question is, how do they present a unique user experience that makes a difference for customers? And that is what the idea of planning for innovation is all about. As we plan for our experience as entrepreneurs, how will we ensure that on an ongoing basis, we're investing time, energy, and where necessary, money to think about how we keep getting better, how we will ward off the competition, and how we will keep improving the customer experience. So we've got to find a model to sustain our businesses once we get started, even if they are absolutely fantastic for the time that we're in operation. There is always going to be someone who is going to be constantly thinking about how do they make a better mousetrap. So we've got to find a model and build that model into what we're doing. Think, to plan, to prepare, and repeat. Think, plan, execute, or launch if you wish, repeat. I submit for your consideration the kinds of organizations who were previously invincible, market leading, dominant in almost all spheres, the thing to have. In the American business context, we refer to them as masters of the universe. And now there are new masters. The iPhone, the Samsung Galaxy phones. And there's room on the board for you. So we talked about how do we know we're ready? And the point is, there are multiple stages of being ready. We've got to plan, we've got to think, we've got to build in models for constantly thinking and reinvesting time in making whatever it is we do, whether it's a product or a service, better and consistently relevant. Better and consistently relevant. The experience of BlackBerry demonstrates the importance of doing this. Now, in case I alarmed you, I want to pause for a moment, because when we think of all this planning, all this reading, all this talk about innovation and being ahead, it can be overwhelming. And you might think, whoo, that is definitely not for me. I'm not cut out for that. And it very well may be, as the image on your screen suggests, just a high wire act that you're not prepared for. But I want to suggest to you that there is a safety net. And this is the beauty of thinking about your journey. There is a potential safety net if you are prepared to use it. Teamwork. Teamwork really, really, really helps. Your entrepreneurial endeavor might be an individual effort, but having a supportive group of people to work with can be enormously beneficial. And I want to suggest to you that if you're not familiar with the principle of the mastermind group, I would strongly urge you to become so familiar. Now, I'm not going to reveal the secret, because a part of the fun is in figuring that part out. But the idea is that, as daunting as you might think it is, even for the small venture you have in mind, the principles remain the same, but you don't have to go it alone. You don't have to go it alone. So let me pivot to one of the other questions that was raised. A business plan. And the most important thing about a business plan is that the overwhelming majority of people need it, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the business plan, because as with the myriad of books I just demonstrated, there are thousands of resources available to you about how to develop a business plan. And one size does not fit all, and so it depends on the kind of project that you have in mind. But the most important thing about a business plan, in addition to the fact that it is needed, is not what it does for you, but what it does to you. And again, this is one of the areas where working with others becomes so critically important, because as we talked about the factors of production and that missing element called entrepreneurship, you may very well be the brains behind the operation, but someone else can be the one who does the operations piece, does the financial piece, does the delivery piece, whatever it is. Thinking through that process is really where the greatest advantage to having a business plan comes in, because your intimate involvement in thinking it through and understanding how things came to be is what will pay off in the long run. Think for a moment, you're sitting in front of a venture capital fund manager or a bank manager. They're not going to ask you to talk them through your 5, 10, 15, 20-page business plan or 30-page, depending on what it is. They're going to read it themselves. And they're going to read it, and if it is compelling, that's a plus, and you get another meeting, and they're going to want to walk through it. Imagine how fantastic it's going to be if you are the master of the information in that document. You know what's in it, you know why it's in it, and you're able to respond to the questions that are posed. That's what having a business plan does to you. It immerses you in your operation and makes you master of the details, even if you're not the one putting all the fancy graphics and the fancy language on the paper. You're in command of your project, and you know the what, when, why, and how of it. And so many resources available for you, but I cannot underestimate the importance of going through the process of developing the plan, even if someone else is the one who is doing the typing. And again, I say, you don't have to do it alone. The beauty of entrepreneurial endeavors, whether you're Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, or your Bill Gates or your Steve Jobs, they didn't all do it by themselves. Many other people were there as safety nets to work with them, to support them, to provide benefits or skills that they did not have. And I want to keep encouraging you that even as we think about the steps in developing your entrepreneurial project, it's critically important to not limit yourself, not be stagnant because of what you perceive to be the enormity amount of the work, or the enormity of the task and the amount of work involved. And so this is where you get to be creative, right? Choose not to do it alone. Get help. Be realistic about how much help you need. The bigger your project, the greater your needs, and the more help that you might need. But as you know, Bahamians have a thing about not working together, or they often remind you that it's best to have 90% of something than 100% of nothing, right? Now, as I draw to close, let me touch on a few of the other points that I've been asked to speak about, common missteps. And they're pretty straightforward. Failure to appreciate how much time and money is required to plan. Lack of planning. Inadequate market analysis, and therefore there's no meaningful value proposition, no way for you to distinguish yourself from what everybody else is doing. And failure to implement a proper accounting system. Again, all of these are areas where if you don't possess the skill set, rather than letting that fantastic idea wither away on the vine, the best thing to do is to bring like-minded individuals who share your passion or can come to share your passion to be a part of what you have to do. You must plan, and you must understand in clear terms what it is you propose to do and why. Lack of resourcefulness, lack of creativity and imagination and energy and shared dogged determination to find a way to make it happen. People hit roadblocks because they don't have all of the skills that they need. And the beauty that all of the companies I showed you on the slides present, including many Bahamian companies, there's a reason why it's the Sunshine Boys and not the Sunshine Boy. That when like-minded individuals come together, great things can happen. And so don't make the misstep of being unwilling to seek help or becoming overwhelmed, getting stuck, staying stuck, quitting, and retreating to someday I'll get back to that. And of course, the last point as a consultant, sometimes folks are just unwilling to pay for human capital, and sometimes you have to. What does it take to win? Clarity of purpose. You've got to have a clear vision. The bigger the vision, the better your opportunity to stay involved and make a difference. What happens next? You've got to expect to win. You've got to expect to win. That's sheer confidence and passion and enthusiasm for what it is you have in mind. And that's why we paused and I asked you to just think about what is it that you've been thinking about, dreaming about, but just haven't done. And you have this burning sense that it can make a difference. And if it does, move. You must prepare to win. We talked about that. If you don't prepare, you're not going to succeed. And execution. Great books on execution and many resources on what it takes to actually make it happen. But the first step is taking step one. So many times people don't take step one, and so they never take step two. Persistence. Again, what it takes to win, you've got to be persistent. And celebrate success along the way. It is a marathon, and there are times when it's critically important to celebrate progress along the road. Questions? All right, everyone's still cooking. We lost everyone.
Darren?
Yes.
Darren, let me just ask, is this a good time to start a business? The person is employed right now. Should they consider leaving their a sure thing to take the risk at this time?
The short answer is, I don't think it's absolutely essential to differentiate between depression level time versus boom times. The fundamental question is, if you think about the idea or the project that you have in mind for this business, what is the market saying to you? Is it something that you can implement that will make a difference in this particular kind of economy? For example, I cited Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken during the Great Depression. So obviously he had something that met a need for a lot of people, and he didn't begin franchise. Well, he started it in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, and he didn't begin franchising until late in his 60s, if I remember correctly. And so, is this a good time? The short answer is it depends on what it is you're bringing to the marketplace and whether or not you've put in the work to think through just who those people are going to be that you are going to be targeting. Remember, even in the height of a recession, there are businesses that are doing phenomenally well, and then there are some that are not.
Good night, Darren.
Hi.
Appreciate your talk. It's very interesting indeed. I just feel like for a very long time that it's been placed in my spirit to birth a business, right? But for a long time, when you have responsibility, just fear overcomes you in terms of, you have a mortgage to pay, you got school fees, you got, whatever, you got commitments, and the security of having a job and medical insurance and just knowing that you're going to have this paycheck coming every month or twice a month, whatever it is, I think kind of paralyzes what it did for me anyway, from just taking that step. And when you don't really go out there I heard you talk about, like a part-time hustle. And that's what it boils down to, because you don't have the time to focus on it. And the job is so consuming, my job, that I really don't, by the time I get home, I just want to take a nap. I just want to take a bath and take a nap. And I don't want to hear nothing, think about anything. And it starts all over the next day. So what is your advice? Or how do you overcome that just getting over that hump and getting started when you have commitments, when you have fear, and you just, I don't know. I don't know if I explained it myself well.
No,
But
you're explaining, yeah, you're explaining yourself fairly well, and that's a common hurdle that a lot of people run into. So let me say the part that that I should say, and that is just to repeat, it's not for everyone, but I want to emphasize where I started, which is that if you've got something that you want to do, and I don't remember who the person is who originated the quote, but I am a believer in, if something is placed in your spirit, it's not placed there by accident. That we have a connection to God in a spiritual way, where if you believe the scriptures, where it says your gifts will make room for you. I may be paraphrasing that. But if something's been placed in your spirit, that's when really investing some clear time to think, to reflect on whether that's where your true passion lies is so critically important. Because I think if it's placed in your spirit and it's been nagging at you, it's because you need to act on it. And I believe that if you begin the journey, doors will open. That's a matter of faith, but God didn't put that burning idea in your consciousness because he wanted you to just keep being afraid. I think you have to give it more thought. As I indicated in the presentation, it's very important to begin to get creative about what specifically about your existing circumstances you're going to change in order to take advantage of this opportunity. Maybe it is about becoming more efficient in some aspect of your job so that you can carve out 3 extra hours a week or 5 or 10 hours a week to do that side hustle. And it is after you invest time in that side hustle that it becomes to a point where it's 30% of your income. And then you do the thing which many entrepreneurs do. Make a decision to burn your boats. If you want to take the island, you got to burn the boats. That's what I would recommend. You've gotten that passion, that thing, act on it. But you remember that safety net. Get other people involved in helping you to bring it to reality. Between you and 3 other people, all of a sudden you can find 30 hours to make something happen a week when you had none. By the way,
I agree with you, Mr. Cash, because I know a lot of persons and then we go, you know what it goes back to as well? A lot of persons have this mentality that, okay, if I tell somebody my idea, they will take it and make it theirs, right? But
right.
really and truly, you have to get out of that mindset and be like, hey, I love this thing. Let me find another like-minded individual who could help me bring it to fruition. And yes, we all have lives and we all have A, B, C, X, Y, Z to do on a daily basis. But there are some times when you are free and you just have to be like, you know what? I ain't sleeping today I can make my dream a reality. You have to find the time, or you have to, like really push yourself to be able to do the things you want to do.
I
We can't
certainly
make
agree.
excuses.
It is, fear will always be there. I remember when I decided to go on my own, I went to see a family member to talk about it. We have this expression about having someone talk you off the ledge. That's my uncle, right? So I said, I've been giving a lot of thought to going on my own. So instead of talking sense to me, and said, boy, don't be fool, he said, well, not everyone's made for the plantation, right? And then I called one of my colleagues in the accounting profession, and his advice to me was, well, we're still in this recession. This probably isn't the best time to do it. But the thought of being able to sort of be master of your own destiny drove me far more than the fear of staying in place. And I think that's what ought to drive us. So I want to know who's got a great idea that they believe is going to change the country. That's what I want to know. Otherwise, I'm going to talk for another 2 hours. So.
Talk a little then about Startup Capital. I have this great idea. And well, maybe for your business, you didn't need to take the money, but they need to necessarily come up with a whole lot of money. But for some people, going on your own requires that you have some startup cash. Is that something that should prevent you from getting started?
Yeah, so asking our husbands up one day.
Short answer is, I come back to the question I answered about when you're ready. When most of the things are in place, not all of the things, and startup capital is one of those. The point number one, yes, you are going to need some startup capital. And if you are in a situation where you have a family that you have to take care of, you do want to at least be prudent to plan for a season when the business is not going to be developing as rapidly as you want it to develop. And so in those months, you've got to have resources available to take care of all of your obligations. And so it's very important to make sure that at least that is available. But at the same time, there's no need to be excessively aggressive, because a part of what has to be done is operating on faith. I mean, if you've put in the work and you've thought through the idea, you're comfortable that what you're selling is going to be different from what the others are providing, then you go out on faith and know that in month 2 or 3, you're going to start to see returns and positive responses to what you're doing. So some capital is needed to sustain your obligation. That's just a part of the planning process. But it doesn't have to be perfect. And so some capital for the business, some capital resources to take care of your personal obligations. But don't think you need to have a year or 2 years set aside, because in most instances, particularly in recessionary times, that's not possible.
Darren, thank you for the answer to that question, because I had a similar question. If one is looking for funding or additional funding through the government, for example, how do you go about asking? Where do you go?
Well, I mean, the good news is that over the last 10 years, maybe, the number of options have opened up has been fantastic. I don't remember the formal name for the small business development center that formerly Davinia Blair, I think she's married recently, leads. The venture capital fund is still up and running. The Bahamas Development Bank appears to have been getting new energy and new focus in extending new loans. And so those three from a government standpoint are available, but and again, you know, we're coming into election season. This is not a bad time to begin to challenge the leaders about going back to small business loan guarantees, which were in place in multiple instances over the last 15 or 20 years. And so at a time when the economy needs a shot in the arm, this is not a bad period for government to start to sort of invest in Bahamians with great ideas. The critical thing to understand and to remember from the standpoint of getting funding is everybody wants to get repaid. And this is where, as I talked about it, being immersed in the details in terms of thinking it through and planning appropriately and being able to inspire confidence, that pays tremendous dividends if you're able to do that. Having been chairman of the Development Bank, I will tell you that it has always been a joy when we see well-considered plans put forward by people who've, you know, basically thought it through, documented it, and have some skin in the game. So government, to its credit, both under Mr. Ingram, Mr. Pinn, Mr. Christie, and Hubert Minnis, they've been making meaningful efforts to support small businesses. So a lot of it now depends on whether we're able to rise to the occasion with great ideas that inspire confidence. So work together.
Darren, can I interject here? Darren.
Yes, please.
Can I interject just to say that, as I indicated earlier, this is part one of a two-part series. Our second series will take place on the second Tuesday in February. I think that is the 11th. And during that session, we indeed will have at least two facilitators from the Government Small Business Development Center. And they will, in fact, be addressing funding the dream or funding the venture. And so we thought about that. We know that once you have your idea, once you have your planning done, you need funds. And so that's part two of our presentation during the month of February. So I want to encourage all that are present here today to stay tuned for part two. And we will try to provide you as much information as possible about obtaining funds.
Frankie Wilson taught us when we were in junior achievement that no great idea dies for lack of funding.
Hey, good night, Darren. How you doing?
Excellent.
Good. Thanks for putting this on, man. I just wanted to also add, in regards to funding, to help individuals start thinking that funding necessarily doesn't have to only be in the form of money. You know, I know a few Bahamians that are in the building industry that had, you know, U.S. companies basically fund them the materials that they needed to actually sell. So I just wanted to add that as well.
I think that's a great idea. Oh, okay. All right. I understand you're from Tampa.
Oh yeah. This is Howard's buddy Brian. We met last year, but by his apartment,
Yes, yes, by the pool.
by the pool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Indeed, yes, indeed, indeed. Great, great. A wonderful experience to meet Baymans who are doing great things abroad. I want to talk about this issue of funding, right? And I said in the presentation just how important it is to be creative, right? But not to let the lack of funds deter you. Now, if you think about going to a typical venture capital fund in America, don't think about the Bahamian experience for now. They're going to come at your project and they're going to say, this looks absolutely fantastic. I want 40%. Or I want 50%, whatever the case may be, because they're aggressive and they want to make sure that if it's a great idea and you do well, they want to get their money out and they want to get it out quickly. But maybe there's a different alternative. Maybe your business project is fantastic and there are certain elements that you need, just along the line of what I think Brian said, that maybe if you're talking land, there's a way for someone who has that asset to be a part of your capital structure. So they can't necessarily, or may even be unwilling to invest in a stock on BISX and can't get access to the New York Stock Exchange or any other private venture. But your idea is so compelling, pick the number, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 worth of equity that they can put into your project. Something to consider. I've had people come to me as a professional with business that they were projecting to generate millions of dollars in revenues over the next 5 years. And you give a number for development of a business plan, let's say it's $15,000. And they say, I don't have that. Well, what do you have? 5,000. Well, realistically, you're not going to get time value for developing something where you're looking for a financial institution to put $5 or $7 million into your project, and you're not prepared to invest a few $1,000s for someone to really think it through and make sure that you're able to answer those second level questions. And so the way to get creative with that is, say, listen, I can't do this, but here's what I can do. Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, you go down the list, found ways to bring talented people into the mix when they were starting out. And a part of that was with equity participation. And so we've just got to be creative and say, let's say that this is the month of January, you're going to take the next 6 weeks to just immerse yourself in some reading and pull a few people together to really challenge you to think through your project. And you can walk away from that kind of an experience with thousands of dollars worth of value for little or nothing, because people will be prepared to help you if you're prepared to demonstrate the ability and willingness to invest the time. So my encouragement, dream big. I mean, you just dream big. 25 years ago, I heard a speech. The man said, operate out of your imagination, not your memory. Don't be limited by what you're going through right now. That's going to pass. It's going to pass. So think about the way in which you're going to reinvent, transform. And if it's not by yourself, it's somebody else. But you got to think big. Last call. Frederick?
Hey, thank you very much, Darren. We are delighted to have you with us. It was enlightening. Could not have gotten a better person for part one of this session. And we want to invite everybody who has been with us this evening to participate with us again next month, the second Thursday in February. That's the 11th, February 11th. And where you got our link, I'm sure the persons who passed the link on you will be happy to pass it on to you again, as we will build on what Darren has. If you think about this as constructing a house, Darren has laid a solid foundation. He's laid the blocks, he's taken the belt course, and he even started the roof. We just need a little funding to get the roof completed and to get the windows and the doors and everything else finished. We truly appreciate what you have done for us this evening, Darren. And if we had to pay you, boy, I don't know. We would need funding for that, but we truly appreciate it. It was invaluable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, that's the end of our session for this evening. Again, we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. And we are delighted that so many of you chose to join us. We want to say to you that we have a limit of 100 on the Zoom platform. We also stream this on YouTube. And if you want to see a copy of this, you can go to the Church of Christ Highbury Park, Bahamas on YouTube. And you should see the link for this. It'll be on YouTube. Church of Christ Highbury Park, Bahamas. It's there, so you can, if you wish to watch it or send that link to somebody else who you think could benefit from this. We thank you once again. Good night to you all. As you leave, please say good night. Before we go, let me just let's say a word of prayer. We are so grateful for the time that we had here. Brother Landy, are you available, sir? Landy LaRoda? Is Landy nearby? Landy, would you be so kind and close us out with a word of prayer, please?
All right, you can hear me loud and clear, right?
Landy, I'm having some problems hearing you.
Gain some courage to go after our business plans, our ideas. Help us to be creative. Help us to do everything we do in service to you. And we pray that you get the honor and the glory that you deserve. Just ask that you continue to bless us and keep us as we go through this night and the rest of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right,
Amen.
Thank you. As you leave, just say good night.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Hey,
to
good
you all.
night.
Good
Thank
night,
you once
everyone.
again.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good
night,
Good night.
Good night. We appreciate you coming on.
Bonjour.
All right.
Night.
Good night. Excellent presentation.
All right, Sister Cooper, you there? Are you a small business person? Good to have you on.
Thank you. Enjoyed it
All right.
immensely. Thank you.
Okay, sis.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. What's this square, eh?
Yes, sir. Have some ideas
All right.
are coming to you.
Oh, you are? Okay. Okay. All right, sis.
Good night.
Good night. All right.